fellow councillors. It will be the 5 of us who will be making the decisions on the cases in front of us this evening. To my left, I'm joined by officers who will be presenting the cases and offering us advice. And they are led this evening by Lisa Chung, who's the head of development management, the lady sitting on my immediate left. If I can ask first for any apologies for absence, that there are none. Thank you, Mr. Ebenezer. Declarations of interest. Are there any declarations, anyone? No? Are there any other declarations? I would just mention that we have some applications in Abington Road. This is actually very near where I live, and I know some of the people involved, but I've not been involved in discussions in detail about the applications, obviously. Also at 33 Hollywood Road, one of the objectors, a gentleman who is actually a former councillor, again, somebody that obviously I know, but again, I've not actually discussed the matter with him, so I'm quite content to take part in discussions of those applications. If we can move on then next to, we have the minutes of the meeting that was held on the 8th of February. Colleagues, are you in agreement that I sign those as an accurate record? Is that agreed? Thank you. Thank you very much. In that case, we can move on. It might help if I indicate the order in which we are going to consider the applications in front of us. We're going to start in a moment or two with Kensington High Street, also known as the former Roof Gardens, then Hereford Square, Hollywood Road, Amberwood House. We will then move on to Abington Road again, Launceston Place, Leighton House Museum, the council offices in Pembroke Road, and then finally, turn the page, Avondale Park Road and Hortensia House in Hortensia Road. Councillor Wade.
I do know one of the objectors, but I haven't discussed the case.
Which application is that?
That's agenda item number 2.
Oh, okay. And Councillor Oretti.
Chairman, Leighton House Museum is in Hollandwood, so I just wanted to clarify.
Yes, I mean, okay, that's noted. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so in that case, I think we can move to the first application. So this is the application 99 to 121 Kensington High Street. And I think Julia Dravetska, I think, Julia, you're going to present this, aren't you? So when you're ready, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman. So this presentation is in relation to recently submitted planning applications and listed building consents seeking permissions for renovation and redevelopment works to Grade 2-star Sun Pavilion at 6th and 7th floor, renovation to historic gardens at 6th floor, and alterations to the openings of Dolly's Villa. I will just run through some of the photographs and plans submitted with the application. So this is the area view showing the roof of the application site. You can see the Kensington High Street to the north, Kensington Square to the south, and the Sun Pavilion just in the middle, which the application refers to, and Dolly's Villa to the southwest. This is the floor plan showing the original 1930 Sun Pavilion. That's the plan on the top, and the further extensions done between 1970 and 1998. This is the existing view of the roof. You can see the Sun Pavilion in the middle. I'm just going to mark it with the mouse, with the added 7th floor on top of it, with the lift overrun block at the rear, and the Dolly's Villa just here in the corner. This is the northern side of the lift overrun block. The removal of this prominent external staircase is being proposed, which is just over here. This is the view of the pavilion. The existing terrace at the 7th floor level. the view from the southeast. That's the floor plan showing the removal of part of the non-original structure, which is marked in green, and the blue line shows what is being retained in terms of the existing structure. That's the photograph showing some of the retained original features within the ceiling of the sun pavilion. That's the existing and proposed views. As you can see, there is an existing terrace just on the top photographs facing the south, and there's a smaller terrace on the west side. The existing sixth floor, which is at the garden level. Then the proposed sixth floor. The existing seventh floor on the top plan, which, as you can see, there's an existing terrace just over here to the south and a smaller terrace to the west. That's the view towards Kensington Square from the existing terrace. View towards the west from the seventh floor, towards the new Boots building and Dulles Villa, just over here on the photograph. That's the proposed elevations, the visuals of the proposed pavilion, the additional area of hard landscaping. There's just small area to be proposed to be hard landscaped, which is marked red at the plan at the bottom, just over here. And this is just the photograph showing where the small area of the additional hard landscaping is being proposed. That's the plans and photographs of the Dulles Villa. The proposal is to replace the doors and the windows on the first floor level and the ground floor level. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much indeed. Now, there are no speakers for this. Anyone have any questions about this? Councillor Wade first.
There's clearly a number of concerns about noise and how that can be mitigated and overlooking. But there's also concern about the retention of the original hard landscaping. It's not entirely clear from the plans put forward, and I've overlaid them, actually precisely what is being done on the hard landscaping. And I would have liked to have seen, given the fact that they had the trial party and there were concerns about the small terrace, that they didn't try and amend something in their planting or planning. Did you have discussions with the applicant on that?
So the alteration to the landscape is proposed to accommodate the footprint of the proposed extension. So the hard landscaping is just going to be, so this is the existing floor plan, and as you can see, that's the little space we are talking about here. I'm just going to move on to the proposed plans. So the extension is, just the hard landscaping is to accommodate the extension on this level. There's no alterations in terms of the landscaping overall for the garden, it's just to accommodate that extension, which is being offset by removing the staircase at the back.
Thank you. When you spoke to the applicant, did they consider keeping the public being able to go out, have access to it? Because it's going to be a private members club. It's always had some access because it's a valuable asset, and it'd be sad to lose it completely.
Yes, I understand. I wasn't the case officer, but I'm not aware of the conversation whether it would be available to public. From my information, it would be a private club, and it won't be available to public. And unfortunately, we are unable to put any conditions or kind of force them or to open it to a public. I understand that in the past it had been, but that's not the case anymore.
And what about the privacy and overlooking?
So in terms of, I'm just going to go back to the area view, which would... So the comments that I've seen was mostly in terms of the garden on the 6th floor. The space the objections were raised is in terms of this corner over here, which is true, is quite close to Kensington Square, but that's not part of the application. The terrace, there is already a terrace on the 7th floor, and there's just the additional space to that overlooking. But we had the objections were in terms of this corner here.
No. Okay. In that, Dorrit, you go ahead. No. Okay. No, I was just going to. I wanted to clarify something. Excuse me. This application simply relates to alterations of buildings, including, and I think, thank you for circulating, this was the reason why we had a slight delay in the meeting, the London Gardens Trust. And I think they have observed that a small part of the garden is going to be included in the footprint of the new building. I mean, it is only a small area, but it's a perfectly reasonable point to make. But I'm right in thinking this is just relating to buildings, and that were this to be granted and were it to be built out, there would then need to be a new license applied for. There would have to be a plan of operation, because I think a lot of the comments relate perfectly reasonably to kind of what would the hours of operation of this new private club be, which is a perfectly reasonable point. But am I right in thinking that's essentially what is in front of us this evening?
Yes, you are correct, Chairman. This application is just for the physical alterations to the building and not for the use itself.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Dorrit, do you want to ask a question?
Well, if it's not change of use, I believe the public would have access to the garden, I believe.
I don't think so. In terms of the use, has been a long-established use on the roof of this building. The planning permission was allowed on appeal in 1979. I'm not aware whether there was any restrictions in terms of whether it's a private or public use. The use of the roof pavilion is a club/restaurant, and that was granted a long time ago.
All right, thank you very much.
Thanks. I'm a bit puzzled here. The Gardens Trust is objecting, but apparently this paved area is an extension. They're saying that there's a loss of garden here, but it looks like there's only an extension of hard paving, so there is no loss of green area. That's my first question.
There will be a very small loss of the garden space just for the footprint of the extension, but no other alterations to the gardens are being proposed, and that's also included in the conditions. So any alterations to the garden, except for that small reduction to allow the extension, they will have to submit a new application for an additional extension.
Sorry, that red bit, that red lined or crosshatch bit that you showed in the drawing, that's additional, or it's a replacement for green area? Not that it's very big, but I'm just wondering for clarification. Yes, in that drawing.
So the area marked in red, that will be the area that will be lost due to the extension. And therefore, in terms of the context of the overall size of the garden, it is very small alterations, and it would still be preserved.
Okay, I'm not quite clear what's happening there. I mean, I don't want to spend a lot of time on the small area, but I don't quite understand then what's happening there. It's an extension.
Yes.
So there was green there before. So what's extension of what?
To the building on the 6th floor.
Okay.
So that's
Right.
about...
So this is the area over here.
Ah, right.
Okay.
So that's about 1 square meter, I believe.
That's
There's-
correct. Yeah.
Huh?
That's correct.
That's correct. Right.
Okay, the second question I have a moment is, in here, to somewhere, there's a mention of plant, and in one of the pages in this pack, here we go, is a reference to plant. In order to conceal equipment from sight, a new ceiling cavity will be introduced, etc., hiding the equipment. There's no noise condition here for plant. Why is that? Could we not have a noise condition if they're going to do something? We're going to put covering up. Maybe we should put a standard noise condition in. Well, 2 noise
Sorry,
conditions.
would you be able to refer to the report where?
Yes, it's in the drawings. Hang on. Unfortunately, there's no consecutive page numbers in these things, so you know it would be helpful if in future we had page numbers 1 to 100 or whatever, even if they're handwritten in. But if you look at the last page of drawings before you get to public comments, it's actually got the picture of what you showed at the end, the ceiling plan, and to the right of it there's a paragraph headed Reintroduce Original Skylights, and in the third paragraph there's a reference to equipment, which I presume means plant, air conditioning and so on. In fact, if you look at the drawing, the picture, that looks like air conditioning anyway. They want to cover it up to make it, hide it, which is good. But why not make it silent?
I think it's actually within the building, though, which is not really, not.
Is it?
I believe so.
Are we? Sorry, I'm just going.
Well,
to
we can clarify that.
Is that the photographs you're referring
That's the
to?
photographs, and in
Yes.
the page in the pack, it's part of submission by the applicant.
I should be making clear, this is the internal photographs of the internal of the pavilion, not external.
Sorry, say again?
That's internal,
What's internal?
the skylight and the rotundas.
But it says here, in order to conceal, paragraph 3, in order to conceal the equipment from sight, a new ceiling cavity will be introduced, hiding the equipment and covering the historic fabric. But it doesn't suggest that's inside the building, does it?
My understanding that it's referring to the inside of the building, because I'm assuming there will be some pipes going through the buildings. At the moment, they had the permission to strip the walls just to see what kind of original features there are within the building. So the photographs you've seen in front of you, that is what they found. So in terms of equipment from sites, that would be internal works, not external.
Well, I hope so, because you did say assume, and that's not a good thing. I mean, that's difficult, dangerous, risky.
Yeah. There, in
Unless
terms
you're
of
sure, are you sure it's internal? So it's already, it's already shielded, as it were, that there will be no sound coming out.
That's correct, yes.
Not beyond the minus 10 dBA, below ambient, well, relative to ambient. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. I'll make it very quick on this. Just want to clarify, not only that public will lose access to the garden, is that the case? There will be no access to the public. This will be a private garden, and there will also be extension as it before. And what's more, trees, some of them mature, maybe not, maybe affected. Can you clarify those 3 points, please?
So my understanding is that it will be a private club and no public access would be available to the building on the roof and to the pavilion. In terms of the trees, there's no works proposed to the trees. There's also a condition attached to the recommendation to ensure that any detailing of the works are provided before any any work commence on site. Sorry, what was your second point?
I think you've answered the point, but the trees I were referring to are the trees that will be imported to the garden, and that was just to make it clear. Is that what you're referring to?
Yes, and for the council it's very important as well to retain as many trees as possible. This, as part of this application, no alterations to the landscaping are being proposed except for this small extension.
So how can officers recommend granting an application form which has extension at the same time loses the public? It used to be there used to be a small charge, as the London Charge Trust mentions here. There used to be a small charge open to the public, where after this private, a company will be managing it, and no public will be able to have access to it.
From the planning perspective, we can't force people to open it up to a public. Maybe Ms. Chang would answer.
About the extension, final question, what about the extension?
In terms of the extension, from the planning perspective, complies with our development plan policies.
Okay, good. Well, thank you very much indeed. Well, we've got planning permission and also listed building consent in front of us. I think from my perspective, this has actually been closed for some years, and this is a proposal to bring back into use this actually very unusual and actually historically quite interesting place on Kensington High Street. So the recommendation for planning permission is to grant permission with the conditions set out in the report. Can I see those in favour, please, of granting? Those against? Okay, so that's granted by 3 to 2. We then have listed building consent. There the recommendation is to grant listed building consent. Can I see those in favour, please? Those against? So that is, again, approved by 3 votes to 2. Thank you very much indeed. If we can now... yeah. What do you want to say?
I do think it's regrettable that something that's acknowledged as a historic asset to the borough can't be open to the borough. I acknowledge that the building may be closed, but not the garden.
I think it's entirely closed at the moment. So, we must consider matters of planning, use in planning terms. I think we need to move on. If we can now consider the application at 6 Hereford Square, and I think that Ben Brocky, I think, Ben, you're going to present this, are you?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Planning permission is sought for the installation of 2 air conditioning units within enclosures on the roof of the existing first floor rear extension with additional fencing. The proposal was received 5 additional representations which are included in the addendum report. The first slide shows the location of the property. As can be seen, the rear of the host property in red does back onto houses on Brecon Place. Here's the proposed floor plan. You can see the enclosures, the air conditioning units within the enclosures at the rear of the extension. And just to make clear, the additional fencing has been circled in red. Here's a sectional drawing. Again, you can see the air conditioning units within their enclosures, and again, the additional fencing has been circled in red. And lastly, it's an image showing the extension from a neighbouring view at the rear from Brecon Place. And this has been included because it shows the fencing that's already in place, and the additional fencing would be replicated in a similar way to what's existing. The officer's recommendation is to approve planning permission subject to the recommended conditions. And that's the end of the presentation.
Okay, thank you. Now, we have speakers in this case. First of all, I think two objectors have registered to speak. And I think you have 3 minutes shared between you, if that's right. Perhaps if you'd like to introduce yourself, obviously your neighbours, and please go ahead when you're ready.
Hello, there's only one speaker, that's me. Chairman, members of the Planning Application Committee, thank you for letting...
Could you introduce yourself, please?
Yes, so my name's Claudia Bronda and I'm the resident, so it's from 14 Brecon Place. Thank you for letting me speak tonight on behalf of the objectors in application PP 21078881. Our reasons for objecting are as follows. The applied for AC equipment, if installed at this extreme end of the applicant's roof terrace, would directly overlook the patio of 12 Brecon Place, and the noise created by that industrial-sized machinery would result in a seriously reduced quality of life for not only the owners of that patio, but also for the other flat dwellers in that row of houses. The Brecon houses are typically divided into flats, which have their bedrooms on the garden side. If given planning consent for the location furthest away from the main building of the applicant's house, it would be less than 7 metres away from the nearest bedroom window of the abutting house in Brecon Place. The suggestion that the trellis that can be seen on the photo supplied by the objectors, or an unspecified top covering, lid, would do anything to reduce the noise or visual impact of having mechanical plant so close to your bedroom is ludicrous. 6 Hereford Square already has some compliance issues, e.g. a kitchen extractor outlet protruding over the neighbour's land, see photo. This does not give one much confidence that conditions relating to the AC plant would make any difference. In this time of COVID, it seems particularly unneighbourly to want to install AC plant next to the boundary line of one's curtilage. Should there be COVID or anything else contagious that can be transferred as droplet infection inside the main house, how inconsiderate it would be to spew out the used air all over your neighbour's alfresco lunch. If this application were to be granted planning consent, it would set a dangerous precedent for other developers of a similar mindset. In our temperate climate, the main reason to install AC equipment in domestic settings is the perceived added value this may bring to a property on resale. At a time when we are worrying about how to achieve enough electricity supply to electric cars and to satisfy existing demand, do we need AC to use up yet more electricity needlessly? Please refuse this application in its present form. If you should be minded to grant planning permission for this AC equipment, may we respectfully request a condition that it should be located in a more suitable site within the main structure of the house, sitting on a vibration mitigating base and fully encased in acoustic housing. Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much indeed. Now, I think the applicant's agent has registered to speak. Mr. Oakton, is that right? Sir, okay, so in similar fashion, you've got 3 minutes as well, please. Go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to speak in support of this application. The application seeks to provide 2 new air conditioning units to the first floor terrace of the property, positioned against the existing rear fence. This will allow for cooling within the property, enhancing the internal living environment for current and future residents. something which has become increasingly important as we use our homes more intensively for both living and working. The units will be entirely enclosed with fence panels on all sides to screen the units from view. The application has been made following taking account of officer comments relating to the visibility of the units made on a previously withdrawn application. In order to address this matter, this new application has been lodged, now including fencing to the front of the units of an identical design to that which is existing on the rear and side edges of the terrace, which will shield the units from any public or private views. The proposal has been assessed by the Council's planning and conservation officers, who have confirmed that this would be a suitable solution and would ensure that the proposal does not harm the character and appearance of the Queensgate Conservation Area. In order to ensure that the screen is retained in place, officers have recommended that a planning condition requiring the screening fence to be fully implemented and maintained thereafter as set out by the officer in their report. This condition is accepted by the applicant. The proposal is therefore in compliance with policy CL1, CL3, CL6 and CL11 of the local plan. The application is further supported by an acoustic survey prepared by KP Acoustics, which demonstrates that the installation of the units would satisfy the Council's noise emissions criterion at the nearest noise-sensitive window, as well as British Standards recommendations. The report recommends that the units are situated on anti-vibration mounds, which will be fitted and is something which is secured by planning condition. An additional planning condition has been added to the draft decision notice, which requires that the noise emitted from the units does not exceed a level of 10 decibels below the existing lowest noise level at any time. This condition is accepted by the applicant. The proposal is therefore in accordance with policy CL5 and CE6 of the local plan. In summary, the proposals are of a small scale and are shielded from view by appropriate screening, as was recommended by planning officers. The AC units are fully compliant with the Council's and British Standards noise emissions criteria and will operate at 10 decibels below the existing background noise levels at all times. The proposals are in full conformity with the development plan and all other material considerations, and will allow for the enhancement of the internal living environment for residents of 6 Hereford Square, whilst not harming the amenity of neighbouring residents. I therefore respectfully request that the committee approve the application in line with the officer recommendation. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much. Colleagues, any questions to, and please make it clear which party you're asking. Anyone like to go? Dorrie and then Linda. Oh, Linda, you go first.
I'd like to speak to the applicant, please. There are two things. One, was there any consideration of placing the air conditioning units closer to the building? And two, about the installation within acoustic housing?
So the location chosen was considered to be the best location where the noise emissions criterion could be achieved within the host property and neighbouring properties. In terms of acoustic housing, again, that's not required to allow for the units to operate below the noise emissions criterion that the council set, and also those in the British standards.
Just a further question, if I may. You say it's the best place, but that actually is quite a relatively reasonably sized terrace. There must be balances. This is a densely populated area, people's backyards, next door neighbours. I just wondered whether there were other places that you could have placed it. Was that the only place that you could have put it?
Like I say, that's the location that was required by the applicant, and again, it was deemed to be the most suitable location to meet the criterion, and also to shield the make sure that the units are shielded from view of both the neighbouring properties and the host property.
Councillor Schmetling.
I've got a question first for the applicant. just take up the point that the objector raised. Is the exhaust air filtered of the air conditioning units?
I can't answer the exact the exact specification of the units, but the units are fully compliant with British standards in that respect. The full specification of the units is set out within the report and the acoustic report.
Thanks. I've got a question now for the objector. Your key concern appears to be the noise, but I don't know if you saw, in fact it was referred to already, but conditions 8 and 9 are some of the most stringent you can imagine. If it's operating, you heard, it's, the noise level must not exceed 10 decibels dBA, or decibels, I can't remember what amplitude or something, below ambient if it's steady, and 15 below ambient if it's tonal. In short, it means if you can hear it in your property, it's too loud. So given the stringency of that condition, or those two, because the other condition is it must be mounted on anti-vibration mounts, do you not feel reassured? And if you felt there was a noise coming at, I don't know, midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning that was disturbing, you could just report it. And they'd have to shut down the equipment.
I'm not reassured because one knows that with time, air conditioning units do become noisier. And also, one should say that it would create a precedent because there aren't any other air conditioning units within what can be described as a canyon, as in there's two sets of high-backed houses, and it creates like a canyon effect when there are noisy parties. So just on that basis, I would still be concerned, even though there are these assurances.
But what happens to air conditioning is irrelevant, isn't it? The condition is there. It says minus 10 dBA and minus 15 dBA. In other words, it doesn't matter how old the equipment is, if you can hear it, it's too loud. So it doesn't make a concession to apparently increasing noise of equipment. It just says it's got to be quiet. And if you, in 2 years' time, you can hear it in your premises at whatever, 2 o'clock in the morning, it's too loud. In a sense, the acoustic report is not as important as the condition. Because the condition actually says, and that's any time of the day or night, if it gets dead quiet at night, which obviously it does, if you can hear it, it's too loud. And the applicant has said, he confirmed that it's going to comply, but that's a condition anyway. So why wouldn't that satisfy you? If you can hear it, it's too loud. It doesn't matter whether it's tonight or 2 years' time.
Yeah, can I just make it, environmental health are very good when they're called out for noisy parties, but if there was a noisy, if the air conditioning unit became noisier than it should be stipulated, as you've said, it's not as easy it's easy to close down a noisy party, but it's what you do with a air conditioning unit.
Close it down. Air conditioning, I thought I must comment on the fact you also felt air conditioning units are installed to improve the value of a property. I'm not sure that's the case, especially with climate warming up in the UK. People install air conditioning because it conditions the air to a more comfortable level, certainly in summer. But so why you can shut down air conditioning equipment as well? Flick a switch.
Okay, well, one would have to ask environmental health how many examples they have that they've been called out and the equipment has been dismantled until further investigation. Whether there's other incidents that can be likened to this.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we all accept the point that you're making. So, thank you for that. Councillor Ali, do you want to just come in?
Thank you, Chair. Two quick questions. One to the agent, and I would like to know, in terms of, we understand even at night, late at night, the clock in one's living room can be noisy or can be heard. So I would like to know, is there anywhere that can be guaranteed in the long term that this noise will not turn into noise pollution for the residents or neighbours. And this also, there's also another issue of the overlooking when it's in maintenance or work to be done. Will there be overlooking issue?
To answer the question about overlooking, this is an existing terrace, so in some ways it would prevent overlooking, as there'll be that space will now be used for air conditioning units. Can you just remind me of your first question? Sorry.
Noise pollution.
So in respect of noise pollution, as has just been pointed out, the units will be set so they have to be operating at 10 decibels below background noise levels. That is a planning condition, and if it ever goes above that, they will be in breach of that planning condition. So they will have to be shut down.
My other question to the objector, Claudia, if, as we can have read from the forms, air conditioning are becoming lately commonplace in the borough, and what I would like to know from you is, you've mentioned it will get to 7 meters close to one's bedroom. If it's moved from where it is now, it will also get close to another one's bedroom, or, for example, someone else will be affected. Don't you think that it's sometime at one point we have to accommodate other people's interests and to support what they do, as long as we can find a solution? Where would you like to be moved if you know, my point is 7 meters from one bedroom moved to someone else's bedroom. Don't you think there may be a reason we can, or at least the agent and the residents can work out what is the best place to move?
Well, if it's so innocuous, it can go in the main building of the applicant, because if it really is so silent, why don't they contain it within their main building? Why put it to the very extreme, even if there are these assurances?
Sorry, could the applicant, Mr. Ogden, could you respond to that comment, please?
Yes, of course. So the units simply won't work inside there. They require natural ventilation to work.
So, Ms. Bronder, I mean, that's basically the answer.
They could be put right against they could still be on the first floor roof terrace, but they could be right against the main building. They don't have to be put at the very end of the roof terrace.
Could you comment as well, please?
Yes, of course. So if they were to be housed closer to the dwelling house itself, that would cause an issue potentially at neighbouring properties either side, and also within the host dwelling itself.
Right, thank you very much.
Good. Okay, Linda, do you have a final question, very quickly?
I have a very quick question. When you did the noise analysis, did you take into consideration the ambient noise of the noisy existing noisy kitchen fan? Because that would have raised the ambient noise level.
So the noise assessment that's carried out is done on site, and they set up their systems to calculate to assess the noise there and then on a specific day. So that is what is taken into account. So those would be taken into account in that noise survey, yes.
So the kitchen fan was taken into consideration?
Potentially, if operating on that day, yes. I can't confirm if it was operating on that day or not.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, everyone. So, colleagues, now it's our turn. We can ask officers. I'd like to start by just clarifying a few points. It seems to me that we have not said that the air conditioning units have to be in an enclosure. We've decided that that is not necessary. So essentially, the conditions about noise and the anti-vibration condition, we're saying that's satisfactory, but clearly you wouldn't want a whole load of people looking out onto an air conditioning unit. So for that reason, the fencing, we're saying, must be maintained by condition. Have I got that right? That we've decided on balance that there isn't a need for an actual acoustic enclosure in this case. Is that right?
Thank you. Yes, that's right. The acoustic measurements were done. They didn't recommend that an acoustic enclosure was needed. And the fencing is only for visual shielding. It doesn't have any acoustic value.
Okay, thank you very much. Colleagues, Arian first.
Yeah, just an extension. So we can't apply a condition to put an enclosure.
It's the case here that it's not required. As it's proposed, it would comply with our noise standards. If it needed additional attenuation, then we might be able to. It's just not that's just not the case in this instance.
Thank you.
Sorry, I'm really puzzled by this. I thought the applicant actually offered it. Without an enclosure, how do you guarantee compliance with, the noise levels? Acoustic reports all very well, but in real life, you need to have a reference to ambient. So I don't understand. I thought the applicant actually offered it. So why are we suddenly saying we can't have it? We don't need it. Should have it, surely.
So the drawings do show enclosures, but there's no detailed information on the attenuation that those enclosures give. As the fencing is shielding, the enclosures could also provide shielding from view, but the measurements were taken from the units as they are without the acoustic enclosures, and they comply with the standards that we set. Therefore, there's no requirement to add the acoustic enclosures.
So I'm sorry about this, but I really I need to follow this up. The applicant said it would meet those meet the conditions as stated in condition 8, right? So are you saying that if we don't condition an enclosure, if the residents can hear it, it's the same thing? I really don't understand that. If we don't have an enclosure, does it still meet the conditions, the requirement to be below ambient by either 10 or 15 dBA? This is what I'm not clear about.
Yes, the condition, condition 8 doesn't require that the enclosures. It's regardless of whether it's in an enclosure or not, if the noise can be heard, it's not compliant with the condition and can be shut down if a complaint is made.
Okay, so the condition applies, you just don't need an enclosure, is what you're saying?
That's correct.
Okay, because I was getting a bit worried about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question. In terms of application, of course, we have to accept, officers have to read through application that the residents put, for the comfort, even if it's, my issue is if the application has an effect on number of residents or neighbours in the benefit of one resident, itself is a problem. And one point here is the noise pollution. So I would like to know, was there any alternative position or a place to fit or install the air conditioner has been offered to you, or was it any assessment is being done to the closest where the objector has mentioned? Is there any specific area that can, of course, give the life the residents want, but also protect noise pollution from others?
So no other position was put forward. An assessment had to be made on what was put in front of the officers. Whether other positions would provide better noise conditions or not is not something that was considered. The only position we could consider is here. But I would just like to reiterate that regardless of where it is, in effect, what we're saying is this is only acceptable if it cannot be heard. If it is heard, it's not complying with the conditions that we have imposed. Yeah.
Okay. So, thank you very much. Need to make a decision. I think following this discussion, I think it sounds as though, well, first of all, it's worth saying I cannot recall any air conditioning unit that was popular with neighbours. I can't remember a single one. I think what we can do is by having these conditions that we can have quite strict controls, as has been discussed. If these units become noisy, then we can actually take some sort of enforcement action against them, do something about it. So we need to make a decision. The recommendation in front of us is to grant permission with the conditions attached. Can I see those in favour of granting permission, please? Those against? Okay, so permission is granted by 3 votes to 2. Okay, thank you very much indeed. If we can now move on to consider the application at 33 Hollywood Road, please. And I think Alice Culver, I think Alice, you're going to introduce this, yeah?
Correct. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
This application relates to number 33 Hollywood Road and seeks planning permission for the installation of railings and the replacement of a window to a door at second floor level. The proposal will create a terrace. The existing and proposed rear elevations can be seen on this slide. Members may have noted from the officer's report that this application has been applied for retrospectively. Members' attention is drawn to the proposed railings and the alterations to the door at second floor level, which I'm marking with my cursor now. You can see that on the screen. The proposed door would be finished in painted white timber. This slide shows an aerial image of the rear of the application site. The application property can be seen marked with a red arrow on this slide. As mentioned in the officer's report, there are terraces to the rear of Hollywood Road. The closest terrace is located at number 35 Hollywood Road, which directly adjoins the property to the northern side. Again, which I'm circling here. This slide shows the existing rear elevation of the application site. Members can note the previously approved infill extensions at lower ground to first floor level and the existing railings on the rear elevation. The proposed railing seeking approval under this application can be seen on the left-hand image. Members' attention is drawn to the property on the right-hand side of the photo, number 35, which again includes the terrace at the upper level. This photo shows the terrace from the application property. To the left-hand side of this photo, members can note the railings associated with the adjoining terrace, which is just in this corner here. The terrace at number 35 can be seen again on the left-hand image. Members may also note the setting back of the railings here. The proposed door to replace the previous sash window can be seen on the right-hand side. This photo shows the views directly to the rear of the proposed terrace. Lastly, this slide shows the proposed floor plan and the proposed section. The proposed terrace and associated railings can be seen here on the section and here again on the floor plan. To conclude, there have been no late items and there is no addendum. The recommendation before members is that planning permission is approved, subject to the recommended conditions in section 8 of the officer's report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, I think we have Mr. Lewis, I think, as an objector. Sir, thank you for joining us. So you're a neighbour, so please, when you're ready, you've got up to 3 minutes to speak.
Chairman, councillors, thank you for your time today. My name is Gareth Lewis. I'm the resident and owner of the top floor flat at number 35 Hollywood Road, and I speak on behalf of all 4 legal owners of properties at 35 Hollywood Road. Our objections are on 2 counts. The first is our complete loss of privacy, and the second, that the application is harmful to the conservation area, offers no public benefit, and ignores previous comment by the council on past applications made by the applicant. On privacy, the most significant impact is to the lower ground floor flat and to the top floor flat at number 35. The new terrace railings have been set back from the boundary edge in accordance with council policy, but they still allow the occupier of the terrace a direct view down onto the full glass-roofed living area of the lower ground floor flat of number 35, resulting in a complete loss of privacy to the owner. Privacy has already been taken away with the addition of 2 full-width Juliet balconies on the 2 floors below, and the addition of a terrace above will make the situation unbearable. We ask that at the very least, if the committee approve the proposal, you attach the condition that the railings be moved back by a full 1 metre from the edge of the terrace where they are currently positioned. In addition, the new terrace will directly overlook the entire rear of number 35, and as a result, result in an unacceptable loss of privacy on our roof terrace and the private areas of our flat through the glazed terrace door serving the flat. I would just point out that the terrace at the top of number 35 was approved in 1974-75, some 45 years before the area was designated a conservation zone. This loss of privacy can clearly be seen in the picture under point 3, terrace of number 35, included in the design and access statement submitted. Should you decide to approve the plan, we ask the committee to do so with the condition that a fencing screen is erected along the full terrace boundary with number 35. This screen should be secured on the side of number 33 and rise to 1 metre and no more above the concrete lintel of the terrace at number 35. Second, the proposed development will have a significant adverse effect on the conservation area. It will set a negative precedent for future developments, and it does ignore council comments made in previous applications. We note particularly the council inspector's previous comments to a similar proposal made by the applicant. The comments were, a larger opening at the second floor level would conflict unsatisfactorily with the hierarchy of fenestration in the rear elevation, in which openings tend to reduce in size further up the building. The sash window...
Sorry, I'm going to... If you can conclude your remarks.
I am. 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Sorry, 30 seconds.
Sure.
The sash window on the second floor has been replaced with double-height glass doors onto the terrace. Our estimate is that these doors are approximately 3 metres in height. The new terrace doors are a full 1/3 higher than the terrace door at number 35. Should the committee decide to approve the plan, we ask that you add the condition that the new terrace doors should be reduced in height to 2 metres, being the same as number 35. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Okay. Now, I think the applicant, Mr. Hanjan, are you also present, sir? Yes. Yeah. So, in similar fashion, you have the same, actually a little bit over 3 minutes. So, please, when you're ready, do go ahead.
Thank you very much. So, my name is Ranbir Hanjan. I live at 33 Hollywood Road, and I'm the applicant. I've lived there for 20 years with my wife. We've got 3 children who go to state schools in the borough. My oldest is at Holland Park School, and my daughters are at Christchurch Primary School. This is our family home, which we're future-proofing, so we don't have to move, basically. I don't know if this is relevant. I'm not a developer. We just live there. We've never had issues with our neighbours previously, and we're a little bit disappointed that we're having the issues this time. I think there's a few points I'd like to make. Firstly, this has gone to committee because there were 5 objections, but they're all from the same property, and they're all either people that live in the same property or they're agents of those people. So they're one and the same objection. I mean, they've colluded to split them into 5, but there's one, and the fact that he's spoken on behalf of all of them, it's one objection. I'm disappointed that they've raised these points because they have, the speaker, the neighbour, has a terrace exactly like the one that I'm proposing. But in fact, not only does he have the railings and the door in exactly the way I'm proposing, his terrace is twice the size of my one. Mine is half the width of the house, his is double, it's the full width of the house. So it's disappointing that whereas a terrace is fine for him, it's not fine for me. I mean, that just seems completely unreasonable. In terms of the points that were raised, the overlooking and the loss of privacy on the lower floor, I mean, that's just not true. The only way we could look at the lower ground floor is if the children lean over the balcony, possibly killing themselves in the process. They might be able to see into the neighbour's basement. Otherwise, they can't see it. So that, and the council officers haven't raised that as an issue. That's just nonsense. The complaint is that we can look into the neighbour's terrace, which is next to mine. Well, my terrace is, as you can see from the photos, is much lower than his terrace. So we have to sort of go on tiptoes to kind of look at his, whereas from his high vantage point, he can look straight into our bedrooms and into our balcony. So that's just nonsense as well. And then in terms of the height of the door that he's complaining about, I've not increased the height. The window, there was a window there already. All I've done is dropped the window down. I mean, there's no height change. The window was always at that height. Now I've got a door at that height. It's just dropped down. You can't see it from anywhere. So that's nonsense as well. So the planning officers have reviewed this, and most of what I want to do is within permitted development anyway. The only thing I'm asking for is a railing at the back, which is set back from the edge. It's going to be painted the same colour as the rest of the house, and so blends in. And as for the points about, and this is my final point, as for the point about this has been rejected before because of the hierarchy of fenestration, that's complete nonsense. This is a completely different application. What I tried to do before was I had a smaller window at the first floor, and I tried to create doors at the second floor. And clearly I can't do that because that would alter the hierarchy. But I'm not doing that now, so that point is a non-point as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. If I can ask you both to put your microphones off, do you mind? So, questions from the committee. I'd like to go first, actually, and ask the applicant. I understand the point you're making about, in effect, you're wishing to create a roof terrace in the same way that your neighbour already has. The point has been made about having some kind of screen between the two properties that would provide a degree of additional privacy to both parties. If we were to think about adding that as a condition, would that be something that you would accept?
Well, I would, Councillor, like to point out my balcony is lower than theirs. Anyway, there's a natural screen with the wall. So I don't really think it's fair for you to impose a condition to that effect. Now, if I mutually agree with my neighbour to put a screen there, I'd be happy to do that, but I don't want it as a condition because it's not appropriate. I mean, he's been able to use his terrace all these years and look into our house without a screen. So why is it if I want to have a terrace, I have to put up a screen? That's just unfair.
No, but I think my point was that issues about privacy relate to the amenity of neighbours, which is a proper planning matter, whereas disputes between neighbours, I'm afraid, are really things that we shouldn't be getting involved in. I was just asking you to comment on that thought, on that basis. Colleagues, anyone like to... Councillor Ali, please.
Thank you both for your application. My question to the objector is, that's Lewis. The applicant has mentioned that you actually have a higher advantage than him or than his property. And privacy, we at the application here, the councillors here, when we're deciding application, we take privacy seriously, and that's important. Could you tell us why do you feel this is giving him more advantage than you, because you had a number of years before him and the higher advantage? Can you explain a bit more of that, please?
Of course. The first point I would reiterate was, as the purchaser of the top floor flat at number 35, we inherited a roof terrace that was approved as a repeat back in 1974. Prior to the developments at number 33, there was a natural void between the two properties, so there was nothing to overlook apart from the rear sash window. In terms of the height of the applicant's new roof terrace, it is the case that if somebody stands on that new roof terrace, and the examples of that are the builders that have been there almost on a daily basis for the last 9 months, the wall of our roof terrace sits at about this height on an average adult, which means that their heads look directly into our roof terrace and into the existing glazed door and straight into our property.
Thank you. Can I have a follow-up question with the applicants, please? Thank you. You've mentioned, Rambir, you've mentioned that you've lived with a number of years without having, you feel the same opportunity is being denied, or at least residents is denying. But what about if you happen to have that advantage? Obviously, we talked about the height difference between the two properties. What about what the chair has mentioned in terms of the glassing and safety? Will that be possible in the long term if there's something we can think of? And again, you've mentioned you have your children are there. The safety, we've talked about here, the reducing, objector mentioned the reducing the height and to 2 meters. What about the safety of your children? Can you also mention, if you reduce anything or put extra, will that affect your family life?
Look, I mean, if the I don't have a problem, frankly, with what Councillor you said. I sort of, in principle, have an issue with it because I think it's unfair and it's not required by planning. But I don't have a problem with putting up a trellis, for example, and we'll put plants there, or I don't have an issue with that.
Just
if that's what you meant. Sorry, I was.
Can you finish? You were saying something.
If that's what you meant, I have no issue with putting a trellis. I mean, frankly, it's good for both of us. If you know, we're not. If someone steps out, it's good for both sides. If you don't see each other, so I don't have a problem in putting a trellis up in the way the councillor was suggesting. I really genuinely have no issue with it.
Which could also be a safety issue for your children and maybe even improve your. Do you think so in a way?
No, it's not a safety issue at all because the walls are so high that they can't actually fall anywhere. There's nowhere to fall because the houses are sort of either side, so it's not really a safety issue at all. But frankly, I don't want my children being, you know, if my son's on there, I don't want him being looked at either. So I have no problem in putting a trellis up.
Thank you very much for answering that question.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. The question to Mr. Lewis, the objector. You raised a point about the height of the extension of the Juliet balcony to 2 meters as opposed to 3 meters. What difference does it make for your privacy?
If I invited the council to come round and look at the development from our side, nobody has taken up that opportunity. If you come to the property and view, you will see that the 3 meter window makes a considerable difference to the privacy or loss of privacy, particularly on our roof terrace. Obviously, because it's part of the building, it doesn't make any difference to the loss of privacy looking in through our door, because both doors are next door to each other.
The average height of people in the UK doesn't exceed 2 meters. So I don't understand how would that affect from 3 meters to 2 meters. I don't see a logic behind reducing the height in relation to your privacy. I understand reduction in height to development makes some sense, but in relation to your privacy, from 3 to 2...
I'm willing to accept that. The major point about the size of the door opening is that it's not in keeping with the reduction in height as you move up a building. And there are a number of other doors along that terrace, and none of them are 3 meter. They're all 2 meter or under.
Well, thank you very much, but I'm not convinced with the logic behind 3 and 2 meters. That's it. Thank you very much.
Okay,
Thank
you.
you.
Good. Okay. Dorrit, do you want to ask anything?
Just a quick one, I think, to Mr. Hunjan. How far are the railings back from now? Because the objector mentioned a metre or so, but they look like they're almost that far back, aren't they? Have you got the measurement?
They are. So I think they're 50 centimetres, and I checked on your council policy papers, and that's within what you required. So, I mean, the terrace is only 2.5 metres long anyway. So if I go back a metre, there's nothing left. So I think it's already set back within council policy. And as I said, it's not possible to see. The only way you can see, literally, is if you lean over, and they're not. That's dangerous. No one's going to do that. So.
Okay. Just a matter of interest, how high are these railings? Is it 1,100 millimetres?
They're higher. I think they might. The planning officer might know. I think they're 1,200 because we wanted to just be extra safe with the with the height of them, especially with our son.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, everyone. Thank you. So our opportunity to just check with officers. I think I'm right in saying that this property, obviously there's quite a complex planning history. There have been applications allowed on appeal, and I think although it's becoming a few years ago, there was an appeal decision that was partly allowed, and I think I'm right if I recall, the inspector did make comments that indicated that the principle of this higher level terrace would be acceptable. Is that correct?
So in terms of the appeal, there was an appeal that was partly dismissed, partly allowed back in 2015. Within that, the inspector makes reference to the opening at second floor level. So it references the change from the sash window to the French doors. In terms of the later appeal that was allowed in 2020, which relates to the infill extension, I believe there wasn't any particular mention of the door opening itself or the openings at second floor level. However, as mentioned in the officer's report, there wasn't a concern raised in the inspector's decision, nor was a condition considered necessary to preclude that area being used as a terrace.
Thanks for making that clear. Any points anyone would like to raise? Dorrie.
Just wonder if the officers would like to comment on the objector's point about previous comments made by the council about a previous application and how this somehow is the same thing and merits the same comments. I think that's my understanding.
So I believe this is mostly in reference to the change of the window to the door at second floor level. So we are correct, back in the 2014 application, planning permission was refused due to concerns with the conservation area and the change of the window hierarchy that would come with adding a French door. However, since then, there has been a change in the context, and now it's considered that the addition of the door at that level would be acceptable and would comply with development plan policies.
Thanks. Could you just elaborate what you mean by change of context?
So that refers to some later extensions along the terrace grouping and changes to the fenestration to the rear of Hollywood Road. Since that 2015 application, we've also had the later application in 2020, which includes the infill extensions, which has had an impact on the character of the rear elevation of the property itself.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, and just finally, the point which I raised originally about adding a condition that there needed to be some kind of terrace boundary treatment, trellis, something which the details, I think it would be right, would be agreed by officers, but I think we would be entitled to add that condition if we wished, on the basis that it protected amenity of neighbours. Did you agree with that?
Yeah, should members feel it necessary to attach a condition, we can do. I would just remind members that the distance of that boundary wall, and perhaps I can get it up on the screen, is 1.6 metres. There's already 1.6 metres change in height. But should members feel it necessary, then a condition can be worded and added.
Thank you. So we need to make a decision. Can I start by asking the suggestion that I've made about some kind of trellis or boundary treatment? Colleagues, are you broadly supportive of that, or do you think it's not necessary?
I think it's necessary.
Okay.
I think it's a good suggestion.
Dorothy?
Yes, good suggestion.
Yeah. Aaron?
Sorry, go on. No, you do.
I think, Chair, it's necessary. However, I would point out that since other residents or the neighbours have the same, it will not be kind of unfair to ask that condition. But with privacy, if it helps with the privacy, then it's coming to the point. But it should be an optional. And I think it's a way for the two residents to work together on this, because they, after all, living in the same area. And I think we should give them the opportunity to work out and not to make a specific disadvantage for one. But I think this will be a good start for neighbourly to have that conversation and work out as a plan together. That's my view, because it will give them an opportunity to come back to the table.
Thank you, Chair. I think it should be an advisory, not a reasonable condition. No, I'm just saying it should be an advisory to have a trellis.
An informative, you're saying?
Informative, yeah.
Right.
But not necessarily a condition.
Okay,
A strict condition,
all right.
yeah.
And Dora, what do you think about that?
It's interesting compromise, perhaps. What do you think? I think that's worth putting in.
Okay.
In that form.
Context has changed insofar as
Okay, right.
one person inherited the thing, and then now it's a conservation area, and therefore anything that we say now could be actually used as a precedent in anything else that goes along that terrace. There's clearly an issue with privacy and also probably the safety of the children at that height. So I think that the consideration of the height of the boundary, and which could incorporate privacy as being a new condition, given the fact that it's a new application in a conservation area.
I just want to make a point, Chairman. It's a Juliet balcony. It's not a roof terrace, open roof terrace. So,
No, I think this is my understanding. This is the side, the flank wall with the neighbouring property. It's not the Juliet balcony we're talking about.
Sorry.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think we need to make a decision. I think personally, on balance, I think that this idea of an additional condition between the two terraces, so that there's some additional height, I absolutely agree with colleagues. I think we would very much hope that the various parties can manage to amicably agree among themselves exactly what form that would take, and that officers would respect something sensible that was agreed. I think, Mr. Chairman, does that make sense to you? Is that a reasonable approach?
Yeah, so just to confirm, it would be an informative on the decision as opposed to a condition. A condition will require the applicant to do something, which is different to what you were suggesting about the applicant discussing with the neighbour, which they could do as part of a condition, but I think we need to be clear.
I had in mind that this would be a condition, but the way in which the condition would be discharged would be that there would be a sensible conversation between the parties to put forward something to discharge the condition. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. What I would suggest that you do, however, to avoid a particular situation arising, is that the condition goes on and that an informative is applied to supplement the condition that says the applicant should, in considering that condition, discuss options with their neighbour. I wouldn't necessarily advise putting it as part of the condition because if relationships don't work, it means that condition cannot be discharged.
No, there are... Ladies and gentlemen, as some of you I'm sure do know, that there are conditions about conditions, if you see what I mean, which we obviously have to comply with to be proper. So, colleagues, I suggest the recommendation is to grant, but I suggest with the addition of the condition and also the informative exactly along the lines that Ms Chung has just suggested. Okay? So on that basis...
The condition, sorry, could we just spell that out?
Sorry. What did you want?
Condition, what exactly should the condition contain? I understand informative, but I'm not clear what the condition should be and what I'm going to be voting on.
So it would be details of a screening? Yeah. To be submitted to and approved by us. So the applicant would need to submit those details, but in working out what those details should be, there needs to be a discussion with the neighbours.
And that's where the informative part comes in. So the recommendation is to grant permission, but with that additional condition and also the informative, as we have just discussed.
Sorry, Chairman. This is a retrospective application.
Yes.
So what I would suggest that we do is we put a time frame on the condition, because if you leave it open-ended, there's no security on it in terms of actually securing it. So we could think about within 3 months of the date of the decision, or I would suggest actually if there's going to be discussion with the neighbours, you might want to lengthen that to within 6 months to allow those discussions to take place.
I think 6 months is a reasonable. I think. Thank you very much for reminding me about that. Thank you. So recommendation to grant with that condition and that informative. Can I see those in favour of granting, please?
I do. Thank you.
So that is granted.
Yep.
Thank you very much indeed, everyone. Thank you. We'll just have a couple of minutes break, just a short break. Thanks, Lisa. Yeah, no, I'd forgotten about it. I had... think we can restart. So if we can now move to consider the application at Amberwood House, please. And I think, Ben, you're going to do this, aren't you?
Thank you, Chairman. Retrospective planning permission is sought for the infilling of 2 windows on the northern elevation. I would like to draw members' attention to the condition recommended under the addendum report that the infill windows be finished to match the existing brickwork. The first image shows the location of Amberwood House. It's accessed via a driveway. Accessed via a driveway from Furlough Place on the north. The driveway is shared by number 17, which is Thurlow Lodge, and the host property 17A Amberwood House. Amberwood House is also attached to a listed building, which I'm indicating with the cursor, but Amberwood House itself is not listed. The red arrow indicates the wall where the windows have been infilled, and the red circle indicates the location of a photograph that I shall show in the next slide. So this image just shows that the 2 windows have already been infilled. I would also like to draw members' attention to the officer's report, which makes reference in places that development might amount to, the works could be considered as permitted development. Recent discussions have concluded that because there's an ongoing enforcement case on this, it may be that the property is exempt from permitted development rights until that enforcement action has been finished. However, I'd like to reiterate that the recommendation in the report is to approve on the grounds that it complies with the local plan policies and subject to the recommended conditions. That's the end of the presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. So we have some speakers here. Now, Mr. Cooper, thank you for waiting. Sorry, it's become quite a long evening, but please, whenever you're ready, sir, if you would go ahead, and you have up to 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members of the committee. I represent the owners of Thurlow Lodge, which is the adjoining property, and the wall faces that property. Due to the nature of the comments that I'm about to make, I have alerted the case officer to what I'm about to say, and part of what he's just said about the enforcement case reflects what I've been saying. Unfortunately, there are fundamental omissions in the officer's report that we think are important. It did not tell you in the written report that your enforcement officers started this process by pointing out to the developer that the works are in breach of a planning permission for Amberwood House. At 4.2, you were told that the planning history is of little relevance, but in truth it's critical because the works are unauthorised and in breach of condition number 2. The problem is then compounded at 6.6 and 7.3, where the report says the works are permitted development, and you've just heard what the officer said. This is not correct because when you have unauthorised works in the midst of construction, you cannot get permitted development rights, otherwise we'd lose control over every development in the country, really. And lastly, at 6.4, it does not explain to you that the unusual fenestration in this wall is because it's a remnant from the 1820 Western Grammar School wall that was incorporated into Amberwood House when it was built in the 1920s. It's therefore got some historic significance in the conservation area. There was a similar wall in Thurlow Lodge which has been retained and for its interest. The permission you granted required the wall to be restored as an attractive brick elevation with its fenestration pattern unchanged. It was to be an enhancement in the conservation area. It was a benefit taken into consideration when granting the permission. If it's not delivered, that calls into question the balance of your original decision. You do not expect developers to walk out of this committee and build something completely different. You apply a condition making it crystal clear that that must not happen. An application should now be made seeking a revision to the permission. If that were done, you can compare the whole wall as now proposed to the whole wall that you permitted in the first place. You cannot make a judgment tonight because you do not have that application in front of you. This application is dealing with only 2 windows, when in truth there are 4 filled in. You saw 3 in that photograph. You cannot, you cannot deal with this as bits and pieces. The developer has had years to ask you for changes to the permitted design in advance. They have not done that, they have just gone ahead. Perhaps they gambled that forgiveness after the event would be more successful than asking for permission in advance. If that was the case, please do not let that gamble succeed. Refusing this application tonight is the only safe way forward. It is a positive decision to uphold the correct process and the integrity of the permission you granted. It ensures you retain control, and the developers can then deal with it as a Section 73 application as they should. I'm therefore asking you to refuse permission for 2 reasons. The first is that the works are piecemeal and harmful to the appearance of the historic character of the wall and its contribution to the character of the conservation area. And secondly, because the works are not in accordance with the design in the permission granted in 2011 and are in breach of Condition 3. I also ask you to ensure that your enforcement officers continue to require Amberwood House to be finished in compliance with the permission and conditions, and to take action to secure that should it become necessary.
Okay. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Now, we also have Mr. Hawkley, and I think you represent the applicant, don't you? So, in similar fashion, please, when you're ready, actually a bit more than 3 minutes, but please go ahead, sir.
Thank you, members, for the opportunity to speak this evening in support of the application. My name is Tom Hawkley and I represent DP9, the applicant's planning agent. As is clear from the officer presentation, this proposal is minor in planning terms. It simply comprises a retrospective application for the blocking up of 2 windows on a residential property. We note that officers have recommended the application for approval. In coming to this decision, they have assessed the proposals fully against the key planning policies in the committee report. Paragraph 6.1, officers note that the proposals reduce overlooking into neighbouring properties and land. This is a positive effect of the proposals, which, if approved, will ensure that good living conditions are continued for neighbouring occupants in line with the council's policies. We also note the officer conclusions at paragraph 6.3 that the appearance of the north elevation sits comfortably with its surroundings, and at paragraph 6.8 that the development preserves the character and appearance of the surrounding group of buildings and the conservation area. It is clear from this assessment that the proposals accord with the development plan. We are aware of a number of objections that have been submitted and note these have been addressed in full at paragraph 7.3 of the officer report. In respect of Mr. Cooper's presentation, we consider the planning process has been followed correctly and the concerns are not relevant to the consideration of this application. This is simply an application for the infill of 2 windows, and that's what you are being asked to consider by officers. In conclusion, as the proposals accord with the up-to-date development plan policies and the material considerations, as stated at paragraph 11C of the National Planning Policy Framework, they are required to be approved without delay. I therefore respectfully request that the application is approved in accordance with the officer recommendation. Once again, thank you for your time.
Yes, thank you very much. So, colleagues, any questions? Dorry, you go first.
Thanks. I've got a question to the applicant. Why is this retrospective and why wasn't this done properly in the right order, which is to put an application in first?
I couldn't answer that question on behalf of the applicant. I wasn't on site involved in the timings for the erection of this work, but obviously an enforcement query has identified that the works have been done without the relevant consent, and that's why we're applying for this planning permission.
It's not quite, well, it's sort of part of the planning process, but I'd like to suggest, and I'll say this in public so anyone listening can hear it too, we don't really like retrospective applications very much, and I think you as an agent should in future ask your, if this happens again, ask your applicant to explain to you so you can represent them why it's done in this order, but clearly this is upsetting to a lot of people. Thanks.
Any other questions? Anyone? Linda.
There seems to be some difference between how many windows that need to be replaced, but I think what I'm concerned about is actually the finish of the brickwork. At the moment, it just looks incomplete, damaged, and not a contribution. And I don't see that that is part of the application. Have you got any comment on that, please?
Officers have recommended a condition in addendum to committee which will require that the openings are made to be in accordance with the remainder of the treatment of the elevation so that they will marry with the existing appearance. And the applicant accepts that condition.
Councillor Ali?
This goes back. This question is for the agent, Tom. How would you feel, just person asking, and maybe put you on the spot here, how would you feel if your neighbour goes ahead with the work without not over consulting, and they don't have to consult with their neighbours, but without the proper procedures?
That's really not for me to comment on. I'm here to represent the applicant in their application to remedy a perceived breach of planning. And we are pleased that officers have been able to recommend the application for approval.
One more question. I understand you may not, and I said clearly that I may put you on the spot. So the second point is you've asked for this application for 2 windows, and with what we know from now, that the work has already been done and there was no proper procedures followed. Do you think this could be 4 windows rather than 2?
This application is for 2 windows. There is a enforcement query ongoing, which our team are working to remedy with the enforcement officer, and that's separate from this application.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Any other questions? No, thank you very much indeed then. So questions are questions to officers. Oh, sorry, Arian, did you want to?
No, question to officers, actually.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Okay, you go first then.
Thank you. Just checking, why was this a retrospective application? Was that expired, or was that being withdrawn, or why was it?
Sorry, could you
No,
elaborate?
I believe this is a retrospective application to the previous one. But why was it retrospective? Because he couldn't answer that question, the agent.
Yeah, I can't comment why they didn't apply before the works took place. I don't know is the honest answer to that. But there is the process for retrospective applications in place, and it's been followed quite rigorously in that it was started from an enforcement action and has now come in as retrospective.
Right, thank you.
Can I ask what the status of the enforcement notice is? Because I'm concerned that when I read the objection letters, that they say that there wasn't 2 windows, it was 4. There seems to be some ambiguity as to precisely the level of interventions, for lack of a better description, on this building which haven't perhaps been picked up. So can I ask what the status is and when you expect to have an outcome on that case?
So I believe the enforcement case is still open. I believe this granting of this application, from what I gather, it possibly won't close. It won't deal with all the aspects that the enforcement case was opened with regards. There's the issue with the finish of the wall, whether it should be exposed brickwork or render. I'm not the enforcement officer, but I do know that the enforcement case at the moment is still open, and they will consider the outcome of, if this is approved, whether that's enough to close the enforcement case or whether further enforcement actions need to carry on.
Thank you for that. I think it's important. We need to focus on what's in front of us. Obviously, in this particular site, you know, there are all sorts of other things that may be going on, but we need to focus on what's in front of us this evening. Councillor Larry.
Yes, okay. Thank you, Councillor Husband. You're right in terms of what we have to focus on, but then again, the question comes back to the process of the council. There's no point for us sitting here, elected members and officers, spending their time to focus on and read about application forms. That has to be planning. Imagine if, I know the vast majority of our residents do obey the law and look after, you know, process and follow the procedures and the regulations. But imagine if a number of them, let's say 10% of them, do go ahead with the work which has not been granted. That will obviously will be a chaos in the borough. And I would like to know, having said that, we have now 2 windows. What will stop this development if they come up with 4 or 6 or 5? I think we need to look into the system and then again have a proper report of this development and to understand specifically what they want to do. Is it 2? Is it 4? Is it 6? God knows, because if they have already done what they have done, you can expect anything from them. So my view is to ask questions, more details about this development, so that we can make the right judgment, or at least to grant or not to grant. This is like half-baked application form rather than giving us the full details.
So the process is in place to stop unauthorised development, and that has been followed here. The windows were in. If we concentrate only on the 2 windows here for the moment, the windows were infilled without permission. A complaint was made, and an enforcement case was opened, which has resulted in this application. The enforcement case is not closed. As I said, it's still open. So if there are other unauthorised works that have taken place, that is being investigated still.
Just follow-up question to that. What about the appearance of the windows and when the work takes place? Do we have any more details about that?
So the consideration of the appearance of the windows was whether them being infilled would have an impact on the character and appearance, and the assessment was that the character and appearance would be preserved, providing there's compliance with the condition added to the addendum report. As you can see, the breeze blocks that have been used at the moment, they don't preserve the character and appearance, but ensuring that they're finished with brickwork to match the existing would ensure that the character and appearance is preserved.
Any other questions or points? No. Okay. Well, in that case, we need to make a decision. I think, to my mind, actually, the most significant point here is actually in the addendum report setting out the additional condition, because I think the photographs that we were shown, I think having sort of block work, bricked up windows, I think looked extremely unsatisfactory. I think this condition, I think is actually crucial to making this acceptable, is the way that I would see it, because I think it will mean that this flank wall will then have an acceptable appearance. What do colleagues think about this? Make sense? Go along with that? Yeah. Okay. In that case, I will call for a vote. So the recommendation is to grant with the conditions, including the additional condition in the addendum report. Can I see those in favour of granting, please? Those against? Councillor Schmetling, did you abstain? Or? No, I agree. Okay, so that's granted by 3 votes to 2. Thank you very much indeed, everyone. If if we can now move on to consider the application at 44 Abington Road. And I think, Julia, is that back to you?
Thank you, Chairman. So this application is seeking planning permission for amalgamation of 2 residential units at lower ground and first floor level into 1 residential unit. This is the existing floor plan showing the existing 2 flats. One is at the lower floor level and the second flat is over the ground and first floor level. This is the proposed floor plan showing the 1 unit over the 3 floors measuring 151 square meters. That concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions, colleagues, relating to this? No? Oh, Linda, do you want to say something?
I am concerned about this in the next application. I realise that it comes under the 170 thing, but it does represent a loss of housing in the borough. And that's my main concern. I'm not saying it's not going to make nice habitable space. I'm just saying that we're actually losing units.
That's a fair point. Are there any questions to officers, though, about this? Sorry.
In general, we tend to resist amalgamations. I mean, there are exceptions, of course, each case, but this is 3 into 1. I think it's what Councillor Wade was also alluding to. So how come this is recommended for approval?
Thank you. So we don't resist amalgamations in every case. There are exceptions to amalgamation. In this instance, there are existing 2 flats and they're going into 1 house. Rather than, you've mentioned 3 flats going to 1. But there are existing 2 flats. There's 1 flat over the lower ground floor level and the second flat is over the ground and first floor level. I'm just going to bring up the floor plans here.
So 2 into 1, but it's broken into 3 floors?
Yes.
Right, got it.
So it's reverting to 1 family unit.
That's correct,
From
yes.
3 units.
Of 2 units. Yeah.
Right. I think the policy, if I've got this right, the policy is framed in terms of the floor areas. It's not the number of floors. So this is compliant with the policy. Yeah. Okay.
How do you mean it complies with policy? I thought the principle is simply amalgamation of units, or not.
Well, no, it's the 170 square metre policy. Perhaps, Julia, maybe you'd like to elaborate.
Yes, so our policy says that we do allow amalgamation if there's only 1 net loss of the units. So in this instance, we're going from 2 flats. The proposal is to lose 1 of the units. Also, the other point of the policy is that the amalgamated unit would not exceed 170 square meters. In this instance, it's 151 square meters of the amalgamated unit.
Okay, thanks.
Very good. Okay, well, thank you for that. The recommendation here is to grant. Can I see those in favour of granting, please? Those against? Okay, so that's granted by 3 votes to 2. Thank you. So if we can now move on to the next application, which is in fact number 48, Abington Road.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. So this application is also seeking amalgamation of the lower ground floor flats to create 1 residential unit. So the existing site is three flats, 1 flat on each floor, and the proposal is to retain 2 units, 1 on the amalgamated lower and ground floor, and the remaining flat at the first floor level, the same as the previous application, complies with all our policies. That concludes. Thank you.
Okay, so just to make sure we've got this right. So although this is a very similar property, it in fact is currently 3 fairly small flats. And what is happening is because the policy would not allow the amalgamation of all 3, in other words, the loss of 2 homes, okay, on that basis, 2 of the units can be amalgamated, and they obviously remain below the 170 square metres. But we also, I think we demand an undertaking, so there'd have to be a legal agreement that there couldn't be further amalgamations. Yeah?
That's correct, Chairman. In this instance, we do require a legal agreement because of the remaining unit, and there could be a possibility to amalgamate further within the building.
Are there further questions? Councillor Alley. Yeah.
Thank you, Chairman. I think the question is here is the loss of units, and as we've said earlier, we have housing crisis in this borough, and to reduce 2 properties to 1 or even 3 to 2 is an issue that I think we should think about it, and we should be consistent with our policies and in fact delivering homes for everyone in the borough. Having said that, my concern is if we approve this from 3 to 2, then waited for a couple of months or maybe a year or 2, what will it stop the residents to make it from 2 to 1? Because if they are within the policy again. So it will be, I think, a problem, and I think it should be stopped outright.
Yes, so the Section 106 legal agreement would not allow the applicant to amalgamate any further within the property.
But my question is, as you, of course, have seen it from here, it's the same developer or the same agent representing individual. So do we have a chain here? How many homes from the same agent representing changing from 1 to 2, or maybe from 2 to 1 or 3 to 2?
I think what we need to remember, this is a stand-alone application and it's a single building. Whether the applicant owns other properties within the terrace is not a planning material consideration. We do have to take it into consideration that this is one single building subdivided into 3 flats. So in terms of the planning policy, it complies with our development and with our amalgamation policy. I understand the concerns you've raised, but in this instance, it does comply with our policies.
Despite the housing crisis we have, fair enough. All right, thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Any other points? Linda.
I am concerned because we've now got 40, 42, 46, 48 and 50. And actually, if you look at that overall, it's not just 1 or 2 units we're losing more. And it's the different size units that we're losing. So I realise you say it's an individual building by individual building, but I am concerned that it does seem extraordinary that you have a set, given the size of the buildings as well. If it had been a 3-storey house you might have just been able to justify these 170 square metres, but actually these are relatively small houses. And actually, I don't think that applies. You're still losing the units.
I'm not sure. I think the comment that I would make is that there's an entirely reasonable discussion to suggest that our local plan maybe should say something different from what it does. But in terms of the development plan as it is, then this application is with the crucial point that there's the legal undertaking that has to be given. With that, then it is entirely compliant, I think. Is that yeah, correct? Yeah.
I have to say the ground floor flat is 40 square metres roughly. Isn't huge, so the total becomes a more livable 90 square metres, which could, I suppose one could argue, becomes a family flat. rather than a single person's flat. I mean, 40 square metres is not, it's not a lot.
Mine is about 40, that's nothing.
Yeah, that's just a comment.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fair comment. So the recommendation here is to grant, obviously with the conditions set out in the report and the requirement for the completion of the undertaking. Can I see those in favour, please, of granting? Those against? Okay, so that's granted. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. If we can now move on to Launceston Place, please. And I think, Julia, is that still you? Yep.
Yes, that's me. Thank you, Chairman. So first of all, I would like to draw the members' attention to the addendum. The condition 5 is proposed to be amended to also include that the main roof of the building shall not be used at any time as a terrace and amenity space. So this application is seeking planning permission for a moderation of the existing extension and creation of a small terrace. This is the area view showing the existing rear extension properties along Launceston Place. The application site is marked with yellow arrow. There is an art gallery on the ground floor level with residential use above. As you can see from this photograph, the application site benefits from the rear extension, which I'm just pointing with my cursor, which is proposed to be modified to create a very small terrace. This photograph is showing the location of the proposed terrace, marked in yellow arrow as well, and the red arrows are showing the existing terraces within the immediate context of the site. So as you can see, there is an existing terrace just at number 3, and there are existing roof terraces at the properties further along the group. This is the existing and proposed plans. The existing elevation showing the existing glazed extension with a sloping roof. And the proposed elevation is showing modified rear elevation, including doors, and proposed small terrace with railings above, and the roof light at the main roof, just over here. This is the existing and proposed cross sections and side elevation facing number 5. This is the view from the window above the terrace. The flat roof of the existing extension is just over here. I'm just pointing it with my cursor. This is the view towards number 5, Launceston Place, taken from the window, from the existing window. As you can see, there's already overlooking into the garden. And this is the area view of the site and its immediate neighboring properties, with the application site and its extension just over here, with the terrace at number 3 just to the north, existing rooftop terrace further along the terrace, and the garden immediately to the south of the application. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now, we don't have any speakers for this, so any questions to officers about this? Aaron.
Are there any similar roof extensions in the neighbouring properties on the same floor?
Yes, there is. I'm just going, there you go. There's a photograph of the existing situation along the terrace. So you can see the red arrow right next to the application site. There is a roof terrace already in situ.
All right, thank you.
Yes, I'm trying to, in the pack, I'm trying to locate what type of finish, the screening there is. So if they're introducing this terrace, which I've seen, which is not very big, and it leads off the study, what is there any type of, what is the railings made out of there? What is the type of protection? Because you've got a number of balconies or terraces, and quite close together. So, people do comment about noise, people do use terraces just kind of as extended outdoor space. So what, did you visit the property or, I mean, what was your assessment? Was it looked from the pictures, it looked really very close to the other one?
So I personally didn't visit the property, but the case officer did. So I would like to draw your attention to the pack. There's quite a lot of photographs submitted with the pack, including the photographs taken by the case officer. So some of the photographs I think will be quite helpful. So one of them is showing the existing views from the existing extension. I would just want to remind that there's an existing sloping roof extension with quite a lot of glazing. So one of the photographs within the pack is showing the views. And it also says the existing glazing is clear rather than opaque. And that there are some photographs also from the existing windows looking down to the neighbouring properties. So in terms of the impact on the neighbouring properties, there isn't a screening proposed as part of the application due to the existing side walls and the boundary party walls between the properties. So it wasn't necessary to put any conditions or details of the screening. In terms of the railings, it's just a standard black painted railings that's also is being conditioned, which would be in keeping with the conservation area. And there's, as you mentioned before, there's a terrace just next to the application site.
Thank you.
Any other questions? No? Okay, in that case, the recommendation here is to grant with the conditions set out in the report. Can I see those in favour of recommendation, please? Those against? No. So that's granted. Thank you. If we can now move on to the applications at Leighton House, please.
That's me again, Chairman, thank you. So these applications have been submitted by the Council and therefore is appropriate for the committee to make the decision. No comments have been received from any neighbouring properties. There is a planning application and listed building consent associated with the site. So this plan shows the extent of the proposed works. The application is seeking planning permission and listed building consent for removal and replacement of section of front boundary wall, which is marked with number 1 on the plan on the screen. Also works to the western side path, number 2. External lighting to forecourt area, which is number 3. And amendments to main entrance and steps, numbers 4 and 5. And installation of a new handrail, which is just marked number 4. The top photograph shows the existing front wall. As you can see, there's a large London plane tree, which is to be retained. This section will be replaced with fencing, as shown on the elevation below. The existing wall is beyond repair. These photographs are of the existing side path. The plan showing the location of the proposed lighting fixtures. The proposed works to the entrance steps, including additional handrail and visibility insert. And the additional timber post to the consented gates. The consents were given in 2021. So it's just the additional post to the gates. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Any colleagues, any questions about this? Obviously, Leighton House is also a listed building, so there's also a listed building consent application as well. Any
Can I just
questions
check?
at all?
Basically, it's, if I understood correctly, the front wall is just to replace something that's not repairable.
Linda?
Oh, sorry.
To replace the front walls to replace something, maybe slightly different design, but something that's not repairable. Is that correct, as I understood you?
No, my understanding is mostly the concerns with the tree. So the tree, I'm just going to... As you can see, there is a large mature tree just behind the wall, so the tree actually damaged the wall. So the fencing is the best option to retain the tree in situ and to create appropriate appearance.
Thanks.
Good. Thank you. So, if I can, we can move to a vote. So, first of all, we have the planning application. So, the recommendation is to grant with the conditions set out in the report. Can I see those in favour of the recommendation, please? So, the recommendation is adopted. Permission is granted. If I can now move to listed building consent, there again, the recommendation is to grant. Can I see those in favour, please? So that is agreed as well. Thank you. Can we now move on to the council offices in Pembroke Road?
Thank you, Chairman. Again, that's me. So, yes, the application has been submitted by the council, so again, it's appropriate for the committee to make a decision, and no comments have been received from any neighbouring properties. This application seeks to vary condition 2 of the approved plans of previous planning permission to make alterations to the seating and arrangement of positions of louvers, which had already been approved in 2020. So this slide shows the previously approved louvers along Pembroke Road. You can see the approved louvers in pink. So they had been approved previously 3, and the current proposal is to just insert 1 louvers along this elevation, just marked blue. This elevation shows, again, previously approved and currently proposed louvers with the pink marked previously approved and the currently proposed in blue along the rear bay elevation. This is the photographs showing where the proposed louvers are proposed to be located and its details. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. So, just so we're clear, the proposal here, these louvers, they're below the level that residents living in Chesterton Square would actually see, because they're at a higher level within the building. Yeah?
That's correct, yes.
Yeah, good. Any questions about this? No. Okay. Well, in that case, the recommendation is to grant with the conditions set out in the report. Can I see those in favour of granting, please? Those against? No. So that is granted. Thank you. Now, if we move on to Avondale Park Road, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I would draw members' attention to the additional supporting letter received set out within the addendum tonight. I would also raise that this building or this application site is council owned and therefore is being presented to members tonight. The application site relates to two-storey blocks located on the eastern side of Avondale Park Road. This application was considered by the Planning Applications Committee in February, however was deferred for more information to be submitted. The application seeks planning permission for the replacement of the existing steel-framed windows for double-glazed white UPVC windows. Since the last committee meeting, additional supporting information has been received, including a typical elevation drawing, product brochure, and further information on the residents' consultation. This information is detailed within the officer's addendum report and included within your packs. The photo on the screen shows the 2 blocks forming along Avondale Park Road. This photo shows the condition of one of the existing windows within the buildings. The following photo shows some context of the application building with the surrounding properties. It's acknowledged that the surrounding buildings include white UPVC windows. So on this photo, you've got the application site to the right-hand side and then neighbouring properties on the left-hand side, which include white UPVC windows. And again, the application site on the right-hand side of this photo and a neighbouring property, which includes UPVC windows. To conclude, the recommendation before members is that planning permission is granted, subject to the conditions set out within Section 8 of the officer's report. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions? Dory? Oh, Linda first, and then Dory.
So the original committee queried UVPC, and what was the justification? What was the report? I mean, was it on the design? Was it on the cost? Was it on the... What were the reasons given that you just because they were using it elsewhere? Or what was it? I mean, we can dictate that the design conforms, but I'm just interested because if it's in a conservation area, normally the guidelines are at present that it should actually be as it in wood, isn't it?
Perfect. Thank you, Councillor. So to confirm, the application site isn't located within a conservation area, nor are the adjoining buildings directly on the opposite side of the road or behind. In terms of why UPVC was chosen, I believe that there was a consultation carried out with the residents and that was the most preferred material. The application has been considered by officers and it's felt that UPVC is acceptable. Is there anything else? Sorry, Councillor Wade.
But it would be to the same style and design. So you wouldn't have...
So it would be to the same arrangement, however the UPVC windows would be slightly thicker. If you turn to the drawings within your pack...
Yep. Done that.
The elevation which is set out as window type A for 18 to 24 Avondale Park Road and 26 to 36 Avondale Park Road is what's being proposed. When you're comparing that with the existing windows, they will be slightly thicker in appearance. However, the arrangement will remain the same.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
Yeah, I've just got a quick question, just prompted by a comment in the report about fire safety. I don't think UPVC is a particular risky thing, is it? I mean, I know plastic melts and all that, but it's not a risk, is it?
I wouldn't be able to comment on the fire safety, and that would be dealt with by a separate department should it be considered necessary, for example, under building control. But we don't have any policies in the development plan which don't allow the use of UPVC due to fire safety concerns.
Okay, I mean, I've never heard of any concerns. I just wondered if you knew anything. Thanks very much.
One quick question, Mr. Chairman. Can you tell us a bit about the steel frame that has been removed, that will be removed compared to the UPVC environmental impact?
So in terms of the environmental impact, I wouldn't be able to comment or give more information about the differences between UPVC and steel. As set out, I believe, in the officer's report, there isn't any requirement from policies or the greening SBD for that to be set out within an application. The assessment has been made in terms of the character and appearance, the impact on residential amenity, and it's been found to comply with the development plan policies.
Thank you.
I think actually from memory, the reason this was deferred was that there weren't really sufficient details in the report that was put forward. And I think colleagues, as I recall, had the attitude, well, you know, we have to be able to know what it is we're being asked to approve. Not unreasonable stance. But I think we do now have the information in front of us, and my understanding is that there was actually quite an extensive residents' consultation, and that this is something that was desired, basically. Yeah.
A comment, just a comment. I think the change from old-fashioned Cretel iron single glazed to modern UPVC double glazed is a big step forward in heat retention.
Yeah.
Even modern, in fact, I investigated for personal reasons myself. Metal frames, even today, you can buy double glazed metal framed windows. You know, they also, because the metal is a wonderful conductor, so plastic isn't, so therefore it's a big step forward.
Well, thank you for that. So recommendation here is to grant. Can I see those in favour of granting, please? So that's agreed. Thank you. Thank you very much. And then finally, Hortensia House. And I think that's back to...
Correct. Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah.
This application seeks full planning permission for replacement of the existing aluminium windows with double glazed white UPVC windows. Again, members will note that this application is a council-owned building. The application site comprises 3 separate blocks which form Hortensia House. This photo shows numbers 49 to 56, which is located to the southern part of the site, located closer to the highway. Members' attention is drawn to the existing windows on the building, where some have been changed without the benefit of planning permission to UPVC. I'll just circle this with my cursor. This slide shows some of the existing UPVC windows in more detail. Again, with my cursor. Again, this photo shows the existing openings and some UPVC windows which have replaced existing windows more recently. In order to set some context, this photo shows Hortensia House with Hudson House located to the south. This building includes white UPVC windows, as seen on this image. This last slide shows the existing windows on the left-hand side and then an example of a later UPVC window on the right-hand side. To conclude, there have been no late items and there is no addendum. The recommendation before members is that planning permission is approved, subject to the recommended conditions in section 8 of the officer's report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor
Just a quick question. You've mentioned that some replacement has been carried out without the planning. So why did the officers do that?
I believe that some of the flats are owned separately potentially by leaseholders, and therefore they may carry out works separately to the council.
But what about the leaseholders? Of course they do want a planning, isn't it? Permission to be given.
Yeah, so that will be included within this application. It may be that there'll be separate flats which have carried out works without notifying the council or carried them out themselves.
That does not give them the rights, but thank you for your answer.
Okay, any other comments? No? Okay, right, in that case, the recommendation is to grant permission with the conditions set out in the report. Can I see those in favour, please? So that is agreed. Thank you very much indeed, everyone. Thank you.